Nice. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I am very honored and I'm very happy to have our last guest speaker of this season on the show. It's kind of interesting because the topic we're going to go over and what you specifically do, I feel like I struggled growing up in school, which is funny because now it's the only thing I feel like I do in everything I do. So it's pretty interesting. But ladies and gentlemen, I have Lisa here. She is the founder and the CEO of C3 Speech. She has over 20 years of experience helping international professionals, founders, and executives master the art of communication. So, that being said, Lisa, thank you so much for being on the show. I look forward to diving into your story and how you got here today.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for that nice intro. I appreciate it.
Of course, I know there's a lot more to it as well for things that you've done. I love starting these episodes off though with basically some rapid fire questions to just kind of get the conversation started. So the idea is you tell me if it's true, if it's BS, and you can explain or elaborate if you would like. A lot of this stuff we're going to go more in depth into the conversations, but I just want to yes, no, maybe gray, and then we'll kind of dive into it. Okay,
Okay, sounds good.
perfect. If you're confident, how you speak doesn't matter.
No, not true.
Okay. Having an accent makes you less credible in business.
Not true.
Okay. The best communicators are just naturally gifted.
No, that's not true as well. A lot of not trues here.
I don't know. Okay. AI will eventually replace the need for communication and coaching.
I mean, I hope not,
Yeah.
but I don't think so because I think it requires a lot more of a human touch than people realize, than, just practicing with an algorithm or even with a bot.
Mm-hmm. Nice. I love that. And yes, definitely one of the things we're going to talk about more. The louder you speak, the more confident you sound.
It really depends on that one. I think it depends on how loud we're talking about because I think sometimes people can be so loud they're overwhelming.
Hmm.
And to the contrary, if you're very quiet, yes, you can sound a bit unsure. So if you're a very soft-spoken person naturally, that is something good to know about yourself, especially when you're on a video chat, but when you're in front of a room, it also plays out. So I think there has to be a happy medium. Volume is also very personal. It's also cultural. Oh, okay. So I think it really depends on where you are in the world. And that's actually something that everybody kind of handles volume differently. Some women actually, depending on where they're from in the world, might look at volume as not feminine. And I've actually heard that from some of my clients. And when I say volume, I'm talking about that really loud, brash form of communication. However, if you're working in particular fields, that might work for you. That might be the style of communication that gets heard the most. It's just that it's not always, when that translates over, it doesn't always work for people. And you could really easily overwhelm your audience if you are too loud or too much, too fast, because if they're an introvert, if they're someone who doesn't have that communication style, then they might just check out and think like, okay, this person, too much, not listening. And that's something that I think people don't realize so it's not about being loud. And to go back to what you were saying before, because I wasn't sure if I should elaborate, the accent piece isn't about credibility, but what happens is it is about clarity. So if you're clear, if you can make yourself clear, what I always tell my clients is use your accent, use everything you have as a unique differentiator. There's a sea of people out there. How are you going to stand out? That's one way. However, if people can't understand you, and let's say you're pitching for $5 million, you need to be understood. You need to make sure that whoever you're speaking to gets it. So it's not about having an accent. It is about clarity. And I will say it's about tone too. So the type of intonation, the musicality of the language, how direct or indirect you come off, that actually also plays out. Because again, some languages, some backgrounds are going to answer, very, very harshly. Yes, no, boom. And then some people, again, are really they're a bit more with restrained, I should say. Not withdrawn,
Yeah.
but restrained. Again, who's your audience? What do they need? So it's really about the clarity and then understanding how to use it as a differentiator. And the first question, what was the first question that I didn't
The first
elaborate on?
question is if you're confident, how you speak doesn't.
So the whole thing with confidence, though, is it does come out of you. It kind of exudes. What you feel inside definitely comes out on the outside. You hear nerves, you feel nerves. Your voice tells on you a bit though. I think some people are good at masking, but you can tell when they're putting it on too much because if you really feel like you don't know the information, you could kind of read that in someone. You can hear it in their voice. You can tell by the style of delivery. Also, when someone really loves what they're talking about, when they're really solid on it, you could feel that too. And there's nothing like feeling that confidence. And confidence is not over the top. Again, people think, and especially people from different fields, or people from different parts of the world. I was just talking to someone who works with technical founders. It was a communications company, and a lot of the technical founders, scientists, researchers, academia, they don't tend to be always super over the top. I mean, it's really that's not typically their communication style. Of course, you have some people who are, but those are the types of things where they could be very confident in what they say. They know it, but maybe they're not executing it in a way that sounds that way. So they know the material, maybe they're giving you too much. But again, confidence isn't just loud and big. It's mostly that feeling that you get from someone who makes you feel like it instills it in the audience. This is that trust bond that you get when you're talking to someone that you say, yeah, this person is not like making this up. They're not like, giving me the runaround, because you
Right.
always, you do feel like when someone is a little too much, you could almost feel like it's like they're trying to sell you. It could feel a little, I don't know, cheap. So it just depends on, again, what does confidence look like to that person? And then how much do they need to feel that, to exude that?
I love that so much. And thank you so much for elaborating. A couple things that come to mind before the next question is, for me personally, I've always found that communication is more than just what you say. It's also the things you don't say, but
Uh-huh.
also the other aspects to your body. It's kind of funny whenever I'm talking to people. Typically, I use this in dating, which I'm kind of, I guess, telling on myself. But I would say like, but a line, or I guess a thing that I love saying is telling people like, "Hey, I'm sorry, English isn't my first language.
Uh-huh.
Unfortunately, it's the only one I know." So they're like, "Wait, what?" I'm like, because I read body language because I'm an artist. So I'm typically used to drawing and
Uh-huh.
communicating without using words. So I can pick up on just your body language without you never needing to say anything. And I think when a lot of people think of communication, they're just thinking about what someone says, not necessarily what they're also doing in that state. Because like, it's harder to lie with your body than it does with your mouth. And a lot of
Oh
people
yeah.
don't realize that.
Oh, definitely. I think it was Albert Moravian. It's that circle where, people, when they actually tune in, it's about 7% content. And I think it's
Uh-huh.
like 30 something percent voice and tone. And then the rest is actually the body language.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, again, if someone's like really, pulling back and withdrawn, or if they're just kind of too in your face, you're picking up those nuances. And if you are good at reading body language like you are, it actually gives you a very different perspective of the
Yes.
person. And sometimes if the body language doesn't quite match what they are saying, then again you have a trust issue there, because you're like, I don't know about that, like there's something there that I'm not buying. So I believe that. I think that's a really good thing to tune into, both in ourselves, because we have to be aware, like what are we putting out, what are we putting off out there, and then to pick up in others.
I love that. Also, I would say last question. Good communication can be experienced in a job.
What do you mean by experienced in a job interview? Like you have to
Yeah, so
execute in a job interview?
I say if you're looking for something specific, like in a job, you're like, hey, these are the criteria that we're looking for specifically. Maybe I don't have necessarily all the experience you're looking for, but I'm very good at communicating and being able to translate, I guess, the information that I've done that could potentially be useful in these areas that I lack the experience you're necessarily looking for.
Yes, and I think that so soft skills are really important.
Mhm.
And so being able, first of all, to execute that, thinking about, again, how are you perceived by this person? Do they feel like you really know what you're talking about? And then are you able to communicate your values? So let's say you don't come from that field, but you've done several things. So maybe I haven't done this specifically, but I have done this.
Yeah.
And this is, would fit into what you're talking about. So the closest I came was XYZ, and this is how it played out. And what I usually tell people is Don't just talk about your experiences. Oh, I worked on this managing team for 3 years and it was great. You know, we made lots of money. I mean, it's you really have to be specific. Like, what did it look like when you
Right.
had those interactions? You're a good communicator, so talk about how it looked when, let's say, you were solving problems on a team, because that's going to translate. Talk about, what it's like to maybe lead a team or take the role of leadership on a team if you need to, and maybe experiences that you had in those positions, even if you haven't, let's say, been in leadership per se, but that what might be
Mhm.
what you're going for. If it's a completely different field, then again, thinking about how it translates. What is it that you've done? What's the value that you brought? What's the impact you had? And then always think about that impact piece.
Yeah, this I don't know if this is going to fully relate, but it's funny I love math. I'm more of a math and science person than I was at English or history, though I do enjoy writing. But I remember in math, I would always just get the answer, but the teacher would get mad at me because I would never show the answer or show
Hmm.
how I got there, right? And
Hmm.
in a way, what I'm hearing from you is kind of the same boat. Like some people are like, "Hey, cool, you done this thing, but help me to understand how you did it. What was the
Hmm.
experience? What was your thought process?"
Hmm.
Because now they can actually grasp that you understand what you're doing
Hmm.
regardless if it's directly in like contact with that. And I say that because during I think it was my senior year of college, I did an internship and I went to school for art, but I did an internship for a Fortune 200 IT and software company. So when I got back, a lot of the my colleagues, or not colleagues, but like the students were like, "How did you work with an IT company?" And we're over here painting and drawing like in this field. I was like, because I could translate the things that we do in art to what they were looking and needing for this particular role.
Hmm.
So then I can diversify like my overall resume. They were like, wait, what? And then I did like a whole day of just breaking that down
Yeah.
for students. And they were like, how? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
this literally what you're saying is how can
Yes.
you communicate these things effectively in order to then like create the opportunities, regardless if you don't have the skill set specifically of what they're looking for.
Yeah. And part of it is persuasion, right? Like, you get the person in front of you and they see that you really understand what you've done and how it translated over. And that's a great way to get, to sell yourself. And I hate to say sell, but I mean, when you're in an interview, that particular style that works. When you're pitching, let's say if you're a startup or presenting, you don't want to give too much detail up front, because sometimes what happens is you don't get to like your actual point. Like, so your build up might not be so highly detailed, and some people do like to explain, 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 and then get to, okay, so this is where we are. I would say to people, cut that back a little bit and get to where you are, get people engaged, and then flip it, then talk about, so basically more, here's the problem, here's the solution, and this was the impact afterwards,
Mm.
just to get them listening and saying, okay, I'm with you. This is really cool. You did
Yeah.
this and I want to hear more. So that's something I think is
Right.
very important.
I love that. And you mentioned that too, right? I mean, you're helping people with their pitches, people from startups to executives to, landing interviews, just being able to
Hmm.
really communicate effectively. Before we go further, help us understand how did you even get into this realm of communication, speech, see-through speech?
Yeah.
Like, who was Lisa, I guess, before this and leading
Yeah.
up to this period?
Okay, so Lisa was a speech pathologist. And so I have my degree in speech pathology. I did that for a while, but I was always super, super intrigued with anything international. I traveled when I could. I looked at, or studied cultures or languages, or not that I speak anything super fluently, except a little. I mean, my Italian's decent. My Spanish is but I tried anyway. I gave it a good shot, but I really wanted to learn. And so anytime, and growing up in New York helped this, I could engage with someone from other cultures, I did so. And in my speech life, I typically worked with kids, some adults, some voice work. But a lot of what I learned, again, we're talking about translated over into communication coaching. Because, let's say you're working with kids, right? You're thinking about, first of all, how they communicate. Is it effective? What kind of questions are they asking? Are they able to get the information? But then you're also thinking about speech, the clarity of speech. Now, obviously, it's all more extreme on that end, like, but it is like applicable, because I learned these skills, and then I had to study like the vocal system. So I had to understand, voice itself. What's clear voice? What is nice open voice? what is, voice that might have not necessarily a disorder, but some qualities about it that maybe we perceive as not as pleasant, to listen to, or maybe it's causing some damage. So, and then there are people with actual disorders. But again, if you take the things you learn and translate it over to the everyday person who needs to work on this, you could use those skills. And it gave me some credibility. And then I started immediately, it started with accent work. And then from there, I went to really thinking about, okay, the accent work is great, accent voice, all of that, but there has to be more to this. So I actually studied intercultural communication. I took a class in England, actually, in Bath, with this company called LTS. I'm not even sure if they're around anymore, but it was really cool. I went there for a week and I got to study all this. And I started to think about like intercultural communication, super interesting, and like the parameters. And it's not just like, Greek people do this, Italian people do this. It's not anything like that. It's really thinking about like how people perceive time, how people perceive relationships. How necessary is it to create a relationship maybe before you do business? Because in the States, we do things a very particular way. We actually don't need these deep relationships because sometimes in business, we need a relationship. People definitely like to be with people they like. However, it's a bit more transactional than other places that there's a much longer cycle to this before they actually get to talking business. So things like that. So that was super interesting, but everything kind of informed me. And then I started working for my first accelerator, which was an Eastern European accelerator. And they had people coming in from all over Eastern Europe, anywhere from Russia and Ukraine to Estonia and like all Uzbekistan and
Oh,
Azerbaijan
wow.
and like all these people that came in. And then I got to really like closely learn how stylistically people were super different, and that culturally was pretty different from, let's say, people I was used to coaching. And then they opened a couple of other tracks. I started working with different accelerators facing different countries, and then I really started working with a lot of business people as well, taking the skills I learned and again placing them onto, okay, so what do people need in business? So I think it was more of a journey of like learning as you go. Is a journey of entrepreneurship. And I think I've always
Correct.
been curious about that. But I can't say, and for anybody who thinks this out there, it is, a lot of people say, okay, yeah, I don't have any business experience. How am I going to launch any kind of company? You know what?
Mhm.
I'm good at this, but what am I going to do? You do learn. You either learn the hard way because you know, you're not like recording your books properly, or at the end of the year when you have to pay your taxes, you're sweating, or you start to learn from other people. But it's sort of baptism by fire. Like you go in and you're like, okay, so I've made several mistakes, bad ones. I've also had to learn very quickly how to market myself. A lot of my business is word of mouth, but I still have to have a very particular presence that I put out there. And I have to be aware of like what that perception is on social media and in life. And as far as communication, for me, like you're a communicator. If you're putting out, let's say, media that, you know, has bad grammar, or, you're not like really clear, that's sort of missing, it's sort of giving a mixed message. So you
Mhm.
have to think about what's that perception you want across the board. But yeah, it took a long time, but nothing is impossible. And of course, if you have the finances to hire maybe a co-founder or a team or someone who has those skills, that's always a nice balance. But
Right.
yeah, I was lucky that I met a lot of people who said, no, Lisa, this is not how you do it. Let me help you because you need help.
I love that. I love that so much. And there is a common thread, I think, with a lot of entrepreneurs where it just starts with trying to either solve a problem for themselves or solve a problem
Mhm.
for someone else, right? And then from there is leading with the curiosity, wanting to learn, push the envelope to what could be, or
Mhm.
just in general what's out there. And that's what it sounds like from yourself of making that transition or that shift to now like more global founders and executives is you just became more curious of where the opportunities lied.
Mhm.
Now, it's funny because a lot of the times when we talk to people, like they're creating a coaching offer, a course, some kind of program, I was like, "Hey, you don't have to have something you're something specifically an expert in, but if
Hmm.
you're passionate or you're interested, like highly interested in something, or even have a certain level of expertise, that's great.
Hmm.
Start there, and as you start to build, you're going to learn regardless." And I always advise people continuously be a student of life, right? I mean, I'm not that old, but
Yeah.
like even to myself, I continuously try to be a student of life
Yes.
because the markets are going to change, new insights are going to come out for your industry, like nothing is set in stone. So like you want to be ahead of the game and the curve as well. So as you're growing and you're being curious, you will evolve and your business will evolve as well too. And that's what it
Hmm.
sounds like you did.
Oh, yes. And I am constantly doing that. Constantly. I am
Yeah.
constantly taking classes. I'm constantly reading. I'm constantly talking to people. I have people who I'm very lucky. I have friends who are much, much younger than me, friends
Hmm.
who are, older and mentors, and I see what they've done. Friends who are younger who are much better at tech, and all of them know who they are because they've sat with me patiently for hours trying to figure out different platforms and how to use them. But you have to be open to that. You really have to always be learning because, well, also it makes life fun. I mean, if
Hmm.
you stop, then what's the point, really? Like, you never are going to know everything. And it also keeps like you said, your curiosity going, but it's also kind of like you get to come home one day and say, oh my gosh, I learned something today. That's actually, I think, anyway, that's a really nice way to
Yeah.
spend if you could learn one thing, that's a pretty cool way to come home and end your day. And we don't always get to do that, but if you can, it's great.
Yeah, I agree. No matter if it's little, if it's small,
Right.
maybe it's just an improvement for what you already are currently doing. It doesn't
Yeah.
it needs to be something completely left field from out of your scope. But I 100% agree. Now, could you share with us, I would say like a transformation, something that like you were working with a client with someone specific and you've seen that change in their communication, like
Hmm.
how, because I know at least for myself being able to articulate better has helped tremendously,
Hmm.
because being in the world of sales now more into marketing, that's all I'm doing is figuring out how to make sure I can communicate the right message to the right
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
How have you seen that change with some of your clients, like that aha moment of this?
So I think I'm going to use again the world of startups for now because you really do see a transformation. And I was lucky enough to work with this particular accelerator that I told you about. So this is the Eastern European accelerator. They actually brought on different sectors as they were going. So they had like a LATAM sector, Africa track. So it was really cool. However, you got to see over a 3 month period. Typically, I'll do like a shorter run, but these were full 3 months, once a week. And then on Thursday nights, I would watch them pitch. And I would host a pitch contest and it was fun. We would moderate, but to watch. So we would go back to confidence, whether it was because it was a second language, and that's really hard when you have to present yourself in English. It's hard to do it in your first language, but let's say these guys were coming from, multiple languages. Some people speak 3, 4, 5 languages, and I always have to give people credit for this one because they'll apologize for their English, and I'm always blown away for this because I'm like, okay, you speak 5 languages, or even 3 languages, but whatever it is, you speak more than most people here. So please don't apologize. You're learning,
Mhm.
like you said. But I've watched those people coming from different language backgrounds with the practice and that, really getting up there and kind of desensitizing themselves once a week. Getting up in front of wherever you can present to, or taking those opportunities, even if it's not a formal pitch contest. But let's say people had the opportunity to just, present something at work. Take those opportunities, especially if you have those speaking nerves, because as you said, you know, part of it is just getting used to it, kind of desensitizing yourself to standing in front of a room. And so I have seen people go from almost not being able to present, completely blanking out, completely, and that's a terrifying moment. 1 minute feels
Yeah.
like it's 20 minutes. Like you lose content for 1 minute and you're like, okay, I'm done. That's it. You want to hide your head in the sand for a little while. And it's hard, especially again, because we all have some pride. We all want to
Yes.
do well. We're standing in front of that room. It's kind of like being naked. It's you and everybody's looking.
Mhm.
So how do you make that transition? And I watched several of these companies go from being super afraid, almost not being able to get the words out, to getting more comfortable in English, getting more comfortable with themselves. Some of them, a lot of them were engineers, technical founders. Again, so we have different layers, right? A technical founder might not be as used to being the face of the company because they might have been working on the back end more. So now people are getting used to that. Whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, that's going to matter. Some people are
Mhm.
real naturals. Like you went and you said it before, you know, I think that some people are really just born to connect and they're great. There are some people that you just know, like, they're 5 and you're like, okay, this kid's going to be, you know, he's going to be
Correct. Gonna
something in
stand
front
out.
of the room. Yeah. But we can all learn this. And I 100% believe that because I've seen it over
Mhm.
and over again. People who thought, oh my gosh, I don't like doing this. I hate doing this. I'm terrible at this. And then they got to a point where not only were they good at it, but they liked it. And they started doing it more and more. And some of those people went on to raise significant amounts of funding. And a few of them actually have pretty large companies now. They're in their Series A, Series B, and they're doing very well. Now, just in the world of startups, that's not always the path. Not everybody
Yeah.
gets to do that. But for the ones who do, it's amazing to see, how now this person who has all this executive presence and has had a company for the last 7 or 8 years that built up was the person I met, in the beginning. So it's 100% possible. Not only is it possible, it's just about letting yourself learn it. And if
That's fair.
you're open enough and in practice, it takes a lot of practice. Some of it's muscle memory, like clarity, and you said like really articulating. That's muscle memory. And also
Okay.
thinking about how you think, So
Mm.
this is one, like how you structure yourself. Well, I would say structure is another, and then your mindset. If you go
Okay.
in and you think you're going to suck, you might,
Well, yeah,
because
you've
you're
already lost the
really,
battle.
yeah, like you're like, "Oh, this is terrible. I'm going to be terrible." And then I listen to his podcasts a lot. He's a communications podcaster and he's a professor at Stanford University. His name is Matt Abrams. And he always talks about structures. So Matt Abrams. Sorry. But
Well,
yeah. But he talks about, let's say, when you're thinking on your feet, think about a structure like, what am I talking about? What? So what? So why does it matter? Now what? And then what are your next steps? But whether you're talking about, let's say, problem, solution, benefit, or you want to think about, how to structure your ideas, there's many little devices out there
Mhm.
that can keep you a bit more narrow. Because one other thing you don't want to do is completely go off topic, or when you're nervous you're going to repeat yourself, you're going to say
Right.
the same thing but in a different way, or when it's really important and you really want people to get it, you'll maybe explain it and then explain it a different way and then
Yeah.
explain it again, and then all of a sudden you're somewhere else. So keeping yourself tight, keeping your mind saying, hey, I've succeeded before in many
Mhm.
other things, there's no reason why I can't now. And then that muscle memory, that practice, it's like anything that you have to do requiring muscle, right? Like
Mhm.
it would be like the difference between, okay, I read a book about running or running.
Yeah.
Reading a book doesn't really help you,
No, you
or
gotta
running
actually
once.
run.
Yeah. No, so
I
that's
love
it.
that.
Yeah.
There's a few different things. There's 3 things in specific that, like, that you said that reminded me of particular moments. You talked about the fact of, like, there's people who can speak multiple languages. I remember hearing, I think it was on a TV show, a guy was talking to, I guess, a foreigner, someone who didn't necessarily speak English, but he can speak decent enough, right? And the international person was just like, "You speak English because you have to. I speak English because that's the only language you know."
Mhm.
So what he's getting at, he's like, "I can say everything I actually want to say to you in a better way in my other languages, but because you specifically can only speak and understand this, I now have to cater to you to be able to do this."
Mhm.
So, and it was like a power, I guess, play, but it shifted my mindset, even though I didn't like, I love talking to people of all different types of languages because I just find it fascinating. They'd be like, "Oh, excuse my English." I'm like, "No, no, no, you're good. Take your
Yeah,
time." Like,
I
I
know.
promise you're no worries. But it's very eye opening when you think about speaking to people and understanding like they're not the ones that are in the, I won't say wrong, but who are limited. because they're having a hard time speaking this particular language. You're the one that's limited because it's unfortunately just the only one you specifically
Mhm.
know, whether it's
Mhm.
English, whether it's Spanish, like you only know one, so you're the one that's actually handicapped. You also talk about people putting themselves in the position, and I have this concept of being capable, able, and willing to where, hey, are you capable of working on your speech, being better at communication? It's like, yes. Well, are you able to find out ways in order to do so? Yeah, you can get a teacher, you can get a coach, you can learn on, the internet. But the question really is, are you willing to try and go through the headaches and the bumps in order to become better and speaking and perfecting that ultimately at the end of the day?
Mhm.
And it's like, hey, if you are, then you're good.
Mhm.
Let's work on this.
Mhm.
There was one other thing you had just mentioned. I want to remember it, but it'll
All
come
right.
back to me.
You know what? I was thinking of something that you asked, and maybe I'd like to think about or elaborate on it a little more, is just speaking to the point that you just did. The AI that's happening now in the world, I think everybody has a little fear that it could replace them. It's
Right.
natural. However, I do think, and I hope for this as well, that communication is the essence of who we are as
Mhm.
humans. It's why we're here. We have to connect. We are born to be able to do that. And as far as, like, let's say when I'm coaching someone, I'll shift sometimes in a one-to-one. Now, not everybody works like this, but I don't work off of necessarily a structure. It has similarities through different clients, but I'll see, just like what you said. Okay, so this person is going to need a little more of that concision. This person really, you know what? I just picked up that, their voice, the way they're using their voice, they're really like beating it up, or it's really tight, and it's not giving them the maximum. They're not really able to have that nice openness that they want. And in those little moments, the body language, like you were talking about, those are things that I think, first of all, humans do better
Mhm.
because there are nuances. I think AI is great for the big, broad topics. And maybe even, yes, they could say, you weren't looking or you did something, like they'll look at the obvious. And I think that that could be there. But I don't know that you could ever really program an algorithm or a machine or a platform to read and connect with the person, or maybe understand, unless, so we have all this AI now that can tell, let's say, your emotions through your voice. But again, like, it's good, I think, up until a point, and then you need that human piece, because so what? Like, sometimes it's just that little nuance, that micro shift in body
Mhm.
language or your facial expression that you pick up as a person, and then what happens? The other side, hopefully, starts to speak to that a little bit, or maybe pauses and lets the other person talk. And I think that in this day and age, unfortunately, people are relying on some of this. And
Yeah.
I think it's great for other things. I am not against AI. I think that
Mhm.
actually, for medical, I mean, I'm reading about medical advances every day where, who knows, we might cure cancer at some point soon because it's found at a microscopic level.
Mhm.
But for communication, I think it's great. You could do, like, let's say, a little accent work. Did it hear you or did it not? You could do some communication work, and maybe it could pick up some grammar, or, I don't even know some of the key points. But I do think in the end, humans are made, like I said, we're not only made to do this, but it's important that we do, because, and then we always talk about, let's say, there's a loneliness epidemic in the States. And why is that? Because I think people are forgetting how
Mhm.
to just do that, how to talk to their neighbor. I mean,
Yeah.
we don't even talk to our neighbors half the time. The guy next door who's, a little older, and maybe we say hi, but we don't have the same kind of conversations. And
Right.
maybe we need to practice those. Just like anything else, it's a skill.
Mhm.
So I don't think that we can completely be effectively replaced. I think
Yeah.
it can be enhanced, but not effectively replaced.
Yeah, and even that, I 100% agree with you. Now, I know there's like I'm big into AI. I got a lot of friends. They're like
Yeah.
developing AI software specifically for this, like
Mm-hmm.
speech to voice or voice to text and a bunch of
Uh-huh.
different things. But even when I'm having conversations and picking their brain and we're talking about communicating, a lot of the times it's what you're prompting the tools to do, which is
Mhm.
you're communicating to the software what to then do for you. So it's like,
Mhm.
hey, if you don't learn how to then even communicate to the tool, the AI tool, to get the outcome, even if it's creating speech, whether in the form of written, audio, you name it, you're still lacking that core element of you being able to effectively communicate. So it's
Mhm.
like it still goes back to you have to learn how to
Yeah.
communicate. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter if it's person to person, person to tech, you still have to understand the foundation of what does it mean to communicate and what are you specifically looking for this tool to be able, or yeah, what are you looking for to then tell this tool how to then communicate it specifically? So if
Mhm.
I wanted to write a blog in this particular tone of voice with this particular page, like I have to understand those fundamentals and those principles
Yes.
for it to then even do so
Yeah.
in the first place. So I agree. I don't think it's going to take away fully because it's still a human aspect that it needs to an operator basically in order to instruct, but also that you can tell whatever it's producing is correct. And you do that by having these conversations as you mentioning with real life
Mhm.
people. Like flex that muscle, continuously
Yes.
flex that muscle
Yes.
is important.
I agree 100. That was great. Yeah, that's a good point. And you hear a lot about the algorithm biases and things like that. And like you said, it's probably because a lot of people who are actually teaching these large language models, this is their communication style. But again, like I don't know how much emotional intelligence you could actually teach the platform. Like again, you're picking up on nuances, you're really good at body language. Some of it's overt, but some of it's just that feeling. And it's different because like right now we're on video and that's great. I mean, we're getting to do this. That's pretty cool. I still think like to this day, even though I do it pretty much every day, I still think like, oh my God, that was really cool. I got to meet you, or you get to talk to people in all different places all over the world, here in my bedroom in Brooklyn,
Hmm.
or living room. Um, you know, that's so cool. I just spoke to someone, in Japan and I had a full
Yeah,
conversation and got to see their face. But it still has a different effect than if you and I were sitting right now in the room that you're in.
100%.
And it's just different. And both are great, but still having that in person, if you can,
Hmm.
is wonderful because you pick up feelings off of someone or little shifts that actually that makes people think chatting on video or even presenting on video is much easier, but it's not necessarily
Yeah,
that
really?
because you really do have to turn it up a bit. You have to
Yeah, you
give
do.
more voice. You have to make sure you're super clear, super
Hmm.
concise, because this is in this medium you can lose people faster.
Correct.
And if it's like, let's say a larger meeting where you're just a teeny little box and you just see my head, even if like you're using gestures, and I see you do it too, but like I use a
Yeah.
lot
Oh
of
yeah, talk with my
gestures.
hands.
Yeah, me too. So, and that's great. And actually, there's a whole bunch of research that shows that on video, sitting there like really still and stiff is actually a bad thing. The hands are really good because it kind of disarms people. It makes them feel like you are having that conversation. But it's still harder because again, you and I could be sitting and there's just a little like nuances that you'll pick up and that you
Hmm.
could piggyback off of that are different. So, and understanding that too, like in this medium, you got to work a little harder. You got to be more clear. You could lose people really fast. The cat could run by, their baby is crying, whatever it is, they're going to check out. So, how do you keep them or
Correct.
bring them back, if they get a little distracted?
Yeah, I love that, and a few things comes to mind. A lot of people focus on what they're saying, but don't spend enough time trying to understand how to receive, I guess, information slash receive a person to communicate. And that's what you're to a degree what
Mm-hmm.
you're talking about as well. Is if I'm in person, I'm going to pick up certain things that you're communicating. I wouldn't be able to do so right now, and it's very important because all those insights add up to the larger equation to the information I'm trying to receive to hopefully then give you as well. It's interesting because I'm reflecting on my life, and I guess earlier on in life, I didn't speak as much, and a lot of my friends, even though like I was very well known, I had great relationships, they just thought like I was not soft spoken, but I just wouldn't. I was just per se shy. And then there was a period of life where I came back, and I was just talking more. They're like, "Oh, I'm happy to see that you got out your shell." I was like,
Mm-hmm.
"No, no, I would always talk. I just would always choose when I would
Yes.
want to speak."
Yeah.
Because maybe I'm receiving information based on the environment that you're not picking up, and I'm like, yeah, this isn't the right time for me to speak. But now I just don't have as much of a, not necessarily care, but because I've been exposed to so many different environment styles, I have a better grasp of being able to navigate these kind of situations that I didn't beforehand. Again, it's not that I didn't want to speak or that I couldn't speak at that time. Maybe I just didn't understand how to navigate the
Hmm.
situation how I wanted to. Now I can, but people perceive that to where like, oh, now you're a outspoken person. I was like, no, no, no. I would still speak then. Just now I don't care to whatever environment I am. I'm like, I will do so.
Hmm.
Which I think is interesting because most people don't pick that up. They're like, oh, okay, now I'm this macho person or this bravado. I
Huh?
don't know. I'm definitely not using the right words I'm looking for. But it's like, no, no, that was always you. You just that's just not the muscle you wanted to flex at that time. Um, I want to dive a little bit over into actual C3 speech, right? And I know you have like a specific framework, but help us to understand specifically what is this? What is C3?
Okay, so the C3 is, excuse me, communication. So I think about communication, I think about clarity, and I think about culture. So the communication piece is, how we're putting our ideas together, how we need to execute like those ideas, make them either concise or maybe we need to make them a little clearer in the sense of explaining more, but not necessarily to be wordy, but just to, choose words, your word choices that might be a little more impactful. The clarity piece, I usually think of it, now it could be also, going along with your ideas, but I usually think of it as clarity of voice, clarity of speech, and then culture. Now, if you think of almost like a Venn diagram, all of these three things always have to happen when
Hmm.
you're communicating. We have to have that communication and think about very intentionally, are we giving too much information? Are we giving too little information? Are we overwhelming the person sitting in front of us? Our delivery, do they get it? Do I sound like, I'm distracted, I'm bored? Do I sound like I'm checking out? Like, are they getting the importance of this?
Hmm.
Because, does my tone match that? And then culture is a big topic because understanding, and culture is many things. Culture could be the culture of your city. I come from New York City. My family is Italian American. I'm Italian American from New York City. My grandparents immigrated. My communication style is faster, and I know that.
Yeah.
It's a bit more energetic, a lot more energetic than other parts of the US. And I have to think about that when I go somewhere else
Hmm.
and am communicating with people because sometimes it could just seem like too much. It's
Yeah.
too okay.
And you're just being you.
Yeah,
Like this is just
yeah,
what this is how we do this. What are
yeah,
you talking about?
yes. So that's a
That's
culture
fair.
element too. It's not just culture outside of the country, but or maybe the culture of your field as an artist or as a finance person. Let's say, you're someone in finance. What's, the typical what you think of as someone communicating in that field and what does it bring? So we think about, all of the cultures that make us who we are, all the exposure that we had and all the experiences that we had. And then that goes back to listening. We kind of listen through our experiences. If I experience certain things and you experience certain things and you and I were listening to the same speaker, we might interpret it completely different because you went through
That's true.
a few situations that made you think, oh my gosh, yes, this. And I maybe never went through that. Or maybe I just experienced life in a very different way. So our lenses are different. So how are we tuning in?
Hmm.
And I work with people on that. So to break it down, I work with people on communication in workshops and in one-to-one. I work with people who really, everybody I work with goes back to they want to be more confident. They want to feel better about their communication style. They want to polish it up. It could be an executive who's an amazing communicator, but for them, they're not up to the standard that they would like to be. And sometimes I'm
Hmm.
blown away by this because there's people who I, will get on a call with and they'll tell me, oh, I have this really strong accent and I have this and I'm just not doing, and I'm like, no, you don't. But they want to work on something because type A personality, CEO, they want to feel like they have that command over their communication style. It
Hmm.
could be a pitch or a presentation that maybe you're earlier on in your career. It could be interviewing. But again, you want to talk about your value. You want to talk about what you're bringing. You want to make sure your audience across the board gets it
Hmm.
in the sense of like, how do you pivot from talking to someone who's really, let's say, in your field versus someone who has no clue what you're doing and you have to explain a little more. They always say, like, if it's kind of technical, or even if it's not super technical, think about talking to your grandmother or your 5-year-old. How do you
Hmm.
explain it? Can you break it down? And it's kind of an exercise. I'm not saying you should sound like that all the time,
Yeah.
but it's more like, can you make it much more simple? Because it's not as easy to do as people think.
Hmm.
And then thinking on your feet, answering Q&A, and then always coming back to connecting your voice to your story. Always both. Content has to meet voice. So
Yeah.
content meets voice. And then how does your own culture influence you? As I like have said before, I could go fast. So I've
Right.
had to, and I'm probably not doing such a good job of it now, but I've had to, sorry, everybody, slow down, especially if I'm with international audiences. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, God help people who, if I've had too much coffee and then had a presentation, I've learned to not do that because
Yeah, it's like
it
I might
was
need the energy, but not that kind of energy. We're just gonna wake up an hour beforehand and try to dilute it a
exactly.
little bit.
So it's basically working with people on communication, strategic communication, stylistic, delivery, and honestly, it's a passion because I really think it's important. A lot of people have really important things to say. They want to get it out there, and we need to hear it. And I think, again, in this day and age, I think when we need all the voices we can get, we need genuine voices that come from emotion, come from a place of their passions. And we need to hear it. Right now, unfortunately, we're going back to the loud thing. I think people have this idea as the loudest voice gets heard. But if we could make the points in a way where we're engaging people, we're loving how they sound, or we're just really drawn in for whatever
Hmm.
reason, there's something that really just draws us in, maybe we'll start understanding and allowing ourselves to hear all different types of styles. Because I do think also as leadership changes across the US and on other countries too, not so long ago, leadership was this big male voice, and it's, deeper tone and very booming. And there's nothing wrong with that, but not everybody could live up to that style. People are anatomically different. Women
Hmm.
are going to be smaller. Their larynxes are smaller. Some guys are, smaller stature. You're going to sound different. I mean,
Right.
there are those, atypical, like
Yes.
really big guys or really small people who have like small person booming voice or big, big guys, small voice. But
I feel like I'm that
typically,
guy sometimes.
no, but typically, there's anatomy involved in this. There's, other things involved in this as well. So as we develop leadership in this country, we have to make room for all different styles of like what leadership is. Because when people come to me and say, I have to work on my leadership style, I know what they're saying. I know what they want to sound like, but sometimes they're super effective the way they are. They just have to kind of lean into it a little bit more.
Hmm.
And and I always talk to people about like their voices being more open, not loud, but open. So if you're talking like this the whole time and you're kind of pressing your voice and it's tight, that's not communicating as much. But if I open up and I'm able to, just like you,
Hmm.
have a voice that's not necessary. You don't speak loud, but you speak with a big voice, a big, nice, open voice. If I had to say, I was listening to Jay today and he has a great voice. That's why you're podcasting.
Thank you.
It's one of those things where it's nice and open, but when we're really tense or if it's a
Hmm.
habit, where we're kind of pressing or really nasal, like maybe we could do little shifts there. So it's not about being louder, it's just about being more open and letting your voice actually come out.
Correct. I love that so much. And it reminds me, so I went to an art school, middle school, high school, college, and I was a visual artist, but I would be involved with the other arts areas. So I did choir and or chorus choir, and I did musical theater. And it was interesting because chorus helped me in the musical theater aspect because when you're speaking and you're role playing, you have to be able to articulate, especially if you're on a big stage. So back to
Hmm.
that comment you made earlier, to where it's different if I'm in person versus if I'm on Zoom, I might have to be a little bit more theatric because I have to be able to open up to a larger audience or
Yeah.
platform for the way it receives
Hmm.
the volume, which is very interesting because I didn't realize that till like later on in life that I'm very thankful that I took those classes and it was working on becoming a better singer. But for me personally, I didn't care to become a better singer. I just wanted to be able to utilize this instrument
Hmm.
to the best of its abilities. Now, I still have a lot of work to do. I feel like there's times I definitely mumble when I speak, but it is interesting to see those to where you can get yourself involved into other things outside of just specifically communicating and working on words and diction
Hmm.
that will help transition over it as well. And it's interesting because you say you're from New York. I'm from the South, so a lot of times people are just like, "Oh, you're laid back. You're just kind of calm when you
The complete
speak."
opposite of me. So,
It's good because for me, I'm like, yeah, that doesn't bother me at all
yeah.
because that's how we are. Just yeah, speak, elaborate, do your thing, and it's interesting because whenever I have conversations with people, especially those in relationships, they're like, just tell me your truth. Like, be raw, let it just come out. I'm like, I don't want it to just come out. I want to make sure whatever I say hits and it sticks for me and for you. So I'm not trying to take my time to speak to be correct or to look a certain way, which I think a lot of people are. And I think that's what you're talking about for the leaders.
Hmm.
They're trying to be perceived a certain way when they're speaking versus just back to that clarity. I want to make sure I'm clear, you're understanding what I'm outputting to you, and it's appropriate for the
Hmm.
environment as well.
Yeah. I usually tell people record yourself a lot. And, even if, let's say, you're on a Zoom call, throw on your voice notes on your
Mhm.
phone, listen to it. Is it the way you actually thought it delivered? Is there something, what did you like about your voice? What do you think you could improve? And start getting self aware because what you were saying that you could actually feel changes and differences in your voice and your delivery. First of all, I think some people just have more of that. They're able to tune in. Some people aren't. Some people don't feel their body very much. They're kind of disconnected from it. And they don't know, if they have tension in their voice because they're not feeling it as much as maybe you would because you were trained to think
Right.
about this as an instrument. And it is. It's one of your most powerful instruments. It's how people, I mean, think about someone with a great voice. If you just heard their voice and you don't know what they look like, you don't know who it is, but you're just listening to this voice, you're like, "Oh, that voice." And voices are
Yeah.
powerful, powerful things. So for many reasons, I mean, to persuade, to comfort us, and I mean, in our worst days, people understand, they're not going to comfort you by being like, yeah, I'm so sorry. They are going to lower their voice. "Oh, I'm really sorry about that." Or let's talk about this. And you're going to kind of use a more soothing tone. But if you can't tune into what you do, you're not going to be able to fix it. And also being a little bit intentional in the sense what I usually tell people, let's say you are working on being more clear. Instead of doing it the whole conversation because it takes some thought, maybe you're opening. Okay, so I'm going to work on just being super clear on my intro, and then I'll go back into how I usually sound let's say, if I get too distracted, if I'm thinking about both throughout my presentation.
Yeah.
And then I build on it, get a little better. Do a little longer. But I usually tell people do it, 3 or 4 times a day for just a couple minutes. Really be
Mhm.
intentional. Think about, like, just let's say really articulating or really communicating a message in a way that you want, and then move on. Start thinking about building those habits little by little instead of just one big thing. And again, your phone, I mean, we carry them everywhere. So you might as
Correct.
well use it as a tool to help you.
Yeah, I'm happy that you said that, and I didn't even realize like how long we've been going. I love this. I love this topic just in general because I feel like it is the foundation to any and everything people do. So it's very important. But you mentioned the fact of using phone, like your phone. We talked about AI. I wonder then why are people struggling so much to communicate in a world where communication is at its most, or I would say at its highest peak to be able to converse with one
I
another.
mean, I think it's a few things. Kind of goes back to part of what we were saying about being in person. It's a different challenge. If you're a texter, I think texting is great for, "Oh, hey, I'm meeting you at 12. Okay, yeah, where are you going to be? What are you
Notifications.
going to do? All right, do you want to meet at this restaurant? No, that one's not good. Let's meet here." But if you're actually trying to communicate emotions, it gives you a pass to choose what you respond to. And
Yeah.
in real life, we're in uncomfortable situations all the time. People ask us questions that make us uncomfortable. And that's okay. That's a good thing. You have to have that skill to be able to handle being uncomfortable, or someone making you mad, or someone saying something that completely disagrees with everything you think. And how do you handle those situations? It's not selective. You have to learn to build those skills to become a clear communicator and understand, okay, am I a super emotional communicator? Maybe my emotions are going too much. Maybe they're completely too little, and I'm not giving my boyfriend, girlfriend, whoever it is, my pet, that emotion. If they tell you they had a really bad day and you're kind of like, and it doesn't maybe come off as empathetic as your partner might like. But can you tune into that? And how do you react in real time? So I think as much as we have AI and our phones, and we are super uber connected on every platform possible, almost to the point of like mad. It makes you like, it's maddening because I almost can't check as many apps as I have to communicate. I'm like, okay, there's WhatsApp, and then there's my this, and then my email, and then, oh my gosh, and then, oh yeah, now I have Telegram, and then I have this, and because certain people like this app, and so it's only good. I think it's good to a point, but it needs to be still used in a way where we don't forget how to actually communicate and put ourselves in situations where we might absolutely hate it, because we learn, okay, you can leave, but you learn how to deal. And it's actually something that's really important. Understanding that again, and I think that would open the floor for more debate too. People would understand, okay, I'm going to give my opinion, you could give your opinion, we could talk about it, and then we move on, and maybe we'll never see each other again. But, it's something that I think is really important, that we learn how to, really use the tool we have, as you said.
Yeah, that's so true. Is I don't remember the author, but there's a book I read and I need to finish, but it's I think it's called The Crucial Conversations. It's real
I'm going to write
basically
that
where
down.
they're yeah, it's literally that is how are you able to have the conversations in the crucial not just moments, but the conversations that impact you the most. So some people might hear crucial conversations and it's like your leader telling you, getting onto you because you're doing bad. No, no, no. It can just be a crucial conversation of like, hey, partner, I want to be able to express something to you that's been on my mind that is affecting me. Like, that's a crucial conversation because it's going to impact your life. But if you don't know how to properly communicate that to that person and understanding it, like a thing we talked about, of how they're going to receive it, I think that's why the concept of love languages are
Mm-hmm.
so interesting
Mm-hmm.
because it's giving you the insights of how this person likes to receive, but also how they give love.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell people there is a difference. Just because you receive or you like to give it a certain way doesn't mean that's how you like to receive it. You need to be able to understand that and inform your partner. Now, with that being said, if they don't know how to do that, that's okay. Well, can you teach them how to then communicate with you? And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people fail to do that, not just with their partner, but just even in like business. And I try to take a lot more time now, especially with anyone that I'm involving myself with, is those 3 C's, right? That you're mentioning. What would you say would be relative the most important C? If you had to rank them in order. I know they're all crucial, they serve their own purposes, but if you had to be like, "Hey, start here, then move here." Is there a route or is there an order or is it more of just
It's interesting because I don't know. No one's ever asked me that, but I actually, um, it's a good thing to think about. I don't know that you can, because
okay.
I mean, think about, there are people who are really good at tone, but doesn't mean they're actually saying anything. They're just, there's a video on YouTube about a guy using all different types of intonation, but he's not actually saying anything, and it's really funny.
Mm.
I have to send you the link.
Please do so.
Yeah, it's great. So it's a guy who's actually presenting on a TED Talk, and he's saying, "Okay, I'm going to tell you absolutely nothing, and I'm going to make it sound really important." And let's say I said that to you. If I said to you, "Jay, I really love ice cream." I mean, but I'm not saying anything right there. I mean, it sounds very like it's going to be
Yeah, I'm like,
very
okay.
it's going to be very important. Or you could, be very big and very over the top and really excited. But again, if you don't have content,
Yes.
you're losing some credibility. You could
Yeah.
have really important content and kind of just be like, yeah, okay, yeah, no. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Mhm.
I'm going to tell you about this. And again, you're losing the connection piece. Your culture, I would say, is always part of who you are. So that's sort of that essence of, okay, there's these pieces that just kind of make up who we are. So that's why it's a little hard to pull it apart for me. It's the ability to connect. It's the ability to check in. It's the ability to make sure that you're not overwhelming the person or giving them maybe information that they do not need. And what is the purpose of this? Are you trying to solve a problem with your partner, and how do you approach that? Very differently than, if you're thinking about like well, no, it's not even that different. You're either thinking about educating or making an impact. There's a few different channels to this, but if you're looking to educate or persuade, I think persuade and impact are the three. But when you think about it, like, okay, I'm either standing up here to educate you. Let's say we're rolling out a new platform and I need to teach you. I'm persuading you to use it because there's
Yeah.
a lot of pushback. Or maybe I need to make, again, a big impact on you, as far as, maybe I need to make that impression. Maybe I need you to have some strong takeaways. And also, when you do a big, huge information dump, it's much harder to have takeaways. People are like, okay, what did I learn? So
Yeah.
that's it.
I love that. And I think you're 100% right when it comes to like the tone stuff. And I think more, I could be very wrong, but more men deal with this when they're in their relationships because it's like my partner will tell me something and I have to really listen to not what she's telling me, but how she's telling me. So I know is
Yeah.
what she's telling me is she just wants me to listen
Yes.
or like actually we're here to solve a problem. Because
Yeah.
typically I'm just like, okay, she'll just tell me information just to let me know. She's like, no, that's important. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like I was trying to express this thing. I was like, it did not come off that way. I thought you were just telling me something for
Yeah.
me to just to know.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, okay, no, let me actually clock in. With that being said, I want to know where can people find you as we're wrapping up? Where could they get in best contact with you? If they're like, hey, I love the information you're talking about. This is definitely something me or my team need to dive deeper into. Where could they find you and connect with you?
Okay, so on LinkedIn, you can find me at Lisa and Patty, Patti. And on there it'll say Lisa and Patty, MSCCCSLP, because it's the speech pathology credentials. You can email me. That's an easy one at Lisa at c3speech.com. I think those are the two best channels, either email or LinkedIn. Connect with me on LinkedIn if you have questions. I am on Instagram, but it's not as informative. It's a little bit of a mix of personal and information. So I think LinkedIn is a great channel, and I do post on LinkedIn. So, sometimes I'll post content or articles, and that could be a great way to share. And also here, I hope if anybody, would want to interact, even just people's feedback. What do they think about it? What do they think about these things that we talked about today, or maybe an article? Because I also find it really important to hear people's feedback
Yes.
and see, like, okay, is there another way to look at it? Is maybe there's something I'm not, targeting, things like that.
Yeah. I love that so much. And for you guys that's listening, I only actually like in this conversation, I only got through like maybe half the things I actually wanted to talk to you about. So I was just like, this could be easily a 3 hour conversation.
We could have a part
But
two. Don't
yeah,
worry.
we'll have a part two. Season two, we're gonna have a part two. There's two questions left that I want to ask you
Okay.
before I let you go. I think it's interesting, and it might be like a cultural thing. I know it definitely happens in my culture a lot. I'm African American, just
Hmm.
kind of putting it out there. But a lot of people talk about the fact of like, oh, you're code switching. And people don't understand that it's not necessarily you're trying to like you're changing in order to I'm trying to figure out how to put this. I feel like people see that as a negative
Hmm.
thing versus more of how we're having the conversation of you're trying to meet your environment and the people you're with to where they are in order to make sure you can then have effective communication.
Hmm.
What are your thoughts on people talking about the fact of like, oh, you shouldn't be code switching slash changing who you are to then, put your message out there versus it's like, no, like it's needed or whatnot to then get your message out there
Hmm.
correctly to the people you're trying to talk to. What's your
So,
thoughts?
I mean, I think for African American people, it becomes a little bit more of a topic because then people say, oh, you're code switching. So maybe you're not talking, authentically.
Mhm.
But the truth is, we all code switch, every single one of
Yeah.
us. when I am giving a presentation or when I'm talking to a client, it's very different of how I'm talking to my friends, especially
Mhm.
my friends I grew up with. So I grew up in Queens. I have a few friends that have a very, very similar communication style to me, and myself and let's say my friend Danielle. We can change. I mean, it's probably not the best way of speaking, but we'll interrupt each other. You know, we might finish three topics later, we'll get back to it. We speak really fast if we're speaking to each other. That's definitely not the style I'm going to use when I'm speaking to you or a client or
Right.
anyone else. And I think we all have to do that. We don't, I mean, I think the beauty is that you do have an understanding of when do I need to connect with a person in a certain way and what do I need from them.
Mhm.
If I am trying to, because let's say I'm trying to create a sale, right? I need them to buy into me. So how
Yes.
am I connecting with them? It's not like, okay, take me or leave me. I don't care what you do. This is me. No, you got to figure out if this is your goal to have them walk away saying, oh my gosh, I'm downloading this and I'm going to listen to all
Mhm.
your episodes. How did you connect to them? How did you connect in a way where they loved it or they just got it?
Yeah.
And everybody's a little different. And like I said, I think in certain communities it is even a little harder because people are a little
Mhm.
hard, like more harsh about it, but it's something we all do. It's something
Yeah.
we very rarely get to be the same exact person across the board, nor do we really want to be because we get to flex a little bit of all the sides of our personality.
Yeah, I love the way you articulated that, and it's so true. I'm asked that question because in sales, it's a common thing that is needed because you come across so many different demographics of people, and it's important not that you necessarily have to code switch, but you're trying to match the code on each side so that you can ultimately get the outcome that's needed, which is the sales slash providing the best service. And I did door knocking for a summer, and it was
Wow,
funny because a lot of the guys, they were just like, we can drop you anywhere. It does not matter. We can take you to the ghetto, we can take you to the high end, we can drop you in the country, we
that's
can drop you by
great.
the beach. They're like, you're just, it doesn't matter. We don't like, and they're like, how? I was like, I'm just because I can understand the people that I'm there with, and then just being able to articulate how they articulate. I'm not doing anything different. I'm just matching their code in order to be able to
Yes,
communicate the same message.
yeah.
So
And I
I don't
think
know.
that what makes you you comes out. It
Yes.
is like that warmth that I can picture you going to people's doors and you have the big smile and, whatever it is that, however you're tweaking it, that's one thing, but that warmth and that the essence of you is still there. And I think that's one thing people need to realize too. It's you. It's still you. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
think you're going to go to someone's door and not be you. It's going to
No.
be very hard. So, yeah, I could totally see that.
I love that. Awesome. Now, last question is the show, or yeah, the show is called Info Profit Podcast, and it's
Hmm.
based on our company Info Profit OS. Basically, the concept is you take information, you do something with it in order to create, an opportunity for yourself. Now, we've dropped a lot of gems, insights, value on the show for sure. But what's one piece of information you would love to leave with people, or a question you would like to ask the audience before we close out?
All right. So I'm always curious about, what does excellent communication look like to that person? What does it look like? And so, because I think it's different for everybody, that would be the question I was asked. What does excellent communication look like for you?
Yeah. Whew, that's a good question. I have to think about that even myself. All right, guys, you heard that. Leave it down below. Send it
Yeah.
to her as well too. Your definition of it, and I think it's interesting because even as I'm thinking of it about it now, there's multiple. I think you can get like a commonality for it, but I do think it's based on who you're talking to, what you're saying, for what purpose. So it does still change, but I think the commonalities, what you've done so well of your C's that you've formatted, kind of as long as you're hitting on those areas, the effective communication and the perfect communication will come out of
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
for sure. So you did something great, and I love that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Well, guys, thank you so much. That is the last episode of the season. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed. Please connect and contact Lisa as well. Leave any comments down below. And with that being said, till next season, ciao.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on.
Of course.
All right. Bye.